was a pretty good talk from Ethan Marcotte.
Yeah, that was an awesome talk. Okay. And cool. So we are live. Don't press buttons there barely. Oh, it's fine. Okay.
We're gonna just rip into it.
Yeah.
I'll give it 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, we're broadcasting, so they can wait till.
Yeah, I have a bunch of people just exiting the room and grabbing cookies and stuff. So.
All right, cool.
But yeah, no, Ethan Marcotte's talk is a little kind of relevant to ours too, right? Design systems.
I think it's actually a great tie-in. Ethan Marcotte is, he's the one who coined the term responsive web design. So having him talk about how the industry is shifting towards design systems, pattern libraries being part of it, I think that's actually a perfect thing for us here.
Design principles plus design patterns. That's his definition of a design system.
Right.
I wonder what swag was. But swag, I wonder what they raffled on.
Books, discounts, yeah, lots of books.
Thanks.
I never won anything.
I attended any of the other pattern lab sessions. I know that Chaz Chumley was doing some yesterday and today.
The two-part pattern lab workshop yesterday, which looked really great. What was the big one today?
Well, so today, so after this, we're doing a Birth of a Feather, continuing this, and then Chaz Chumley, actually, right after this, is going to do training for component-based theming in Twig, which is a two-part system.
Sweet. I heard Chaz also has a book on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you like the talk and you want to learn more about pattern,
how does that relate to Twig? Exactly. Okay, let's get started. And if anyone else comes in, I could just see. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is kind of a continuation from the first Birds of a Feather we did on this at DrupalCon Baltimore a couple months ago. We're here to talk about design systems and why they're really difficult, but also how the newly formed Drupal Pattern Lab working group is hoping to help make this process a little bit more mainstream and a little bit less painful for everyone.
So this talk goes over what we've learned over the past year from doing a design system within Pega systems. It was a pretty ambitious project. It's been a rock and ride, and just imparting what we've learned. But
before we get into what we've learned and kind of where we're going, quick show of hands. Who here works on a design system or has worked on a design system in the past that's wired up to Drupal on more than 2 websites? Do you use Pattern Lab?
Yeah, so I work for a consulting firm, so we've used it and then roll it out, had it done. So that's why it's not with Drupal, it's like, depends on what.
Exactly. Design systems and Drupal, they might overlap, but they might not.
Who is thinking of building a design system that uses Drupal and Pattern Lab? Show of hands.
Perfect.
And who just doesn't know what a design system is? It's kind of an ambiguous, you know, it's a little hard to define.
There's a lot, it's a small word, small 2 words, but there's a lot that, well, before we get into design systems themselves, first a quick introduction.
I'm Thomas. I'm a senior front-end developer at Pega Systems. I'm a full-stack, open-source web developer with a passion for enterprise-level digital experiences. I'm also a dad. That's my baby. She's a year and a half. Her name's Anatolia. She is apparently a Jedi apprentice who rides unicorns.
And I'm Salem. I'm senior front-end architect at Pega Systems. This is me at the end of the Disney Marathon ago. I focus on figuring out where this whole responsive web design system, pattern library thing is going, and all that together with all of the digital properties that are part of my day-to-day life. The digital team at Pega is actually quite new. We're about 2 years old now, at around 20 people or so. And for anyone who isn't familiar with Pega Systems, we're right down the road. We create software that helps our clients solve their individual customers' needs and helps them better engage with them. Think of it, we build software that helps our Fortune 500 clients build software to make all that systems a little bit easier.
Right. So, no, just a year ago, June 2016, we had 3 digital properties, 3 websites. Our team, not too big, 10 people. 10 people, not an integer number of front-end developers, 1.5.
Like any enterprise website or managing any series of websites, there's a lot that obviously you need to have in place to make all this be a lot more seamless. You'd have a CSS framework. You'd have shared JavaScript modules. You'd have shared icon and font assets. You'd have a unified front-end build tool set. You'd have a pattern library. Have any of that. Thomas and I came on board. Just for comparison, if we fast forward to today,
we have 6 digital properties. They have doubled, and those sites themselves have markedly different sections. So you have kind of like different sites within sites. It's doubled to 20 people, so that's very quickly growing. The front-end developer team has more than doubled. Still not an integer, but more is good.
We're working on it. Our team's grown. Our roles, our responsibilities have grown. Tying with all this, well, like Thomas mentioned, we've been doing this for a while, and we've seen a lot of these same questions come up more and more. What the heck is a design system? Is it this thing or is it that thing? And why do we need it? The black box between how Pattern Lab, our big tool of choice here, how that actually gets wired up to Drupal. and how, kind of as a random happenstance, that led to the formation of the Drupal Pattern Lab working group at DrupalCon earlier this year. But we'll get into that. And then kind of to wrap up the talk today, talking about what's next, what we haven't solved for yet, where all this stuff is going, and how, as a community, we could really use more help.
So yes, part one. What is a design system and want one? This is why, when we started a year ago, June 2016, with the 3 properties, we just scraped all the buttons, and there are 1 million buttons. A design system, you just get no consistent way of how they're being used. It's just a crazy, uncoordinated mesh.
It's chaos. So, atomic design. I mean, atomic design and pattern lab, which is very synonymous with atomic design more often than not, but like a design system.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Well, I wouldn't say that pattern lab isn't part of ways you can cope or actually roll out a design system. We have a tool in our own toolkit here, but pattern lab isn't a design system. It's a tool for making a pattern library.
And so a design system is where you just take all of these technologies and you jam them into a blender and you add some water, and then when you pour it out, it's just magic, right? You get every style guide, pattern library. That's design system. That's how they work, right? Just okay.
Quick talk.
Yeah.
Well, these are real technologies that we use at Pega Systems to help power our design system and make all cooperate. But this this is the methodology and the tools. This isn't necessarily the what. I think Nathan Curtis, he's at 8 Shapes, which is in the DC area. Sure.
You're not showing up on Google Hangout. Oh. You're just getting your initial droplet screen. Maybe you're sharing the wrong screen or something.
Oh, let's take a look.
Well, thank you for this.
Who presents everyone?
Broadcast.
Broadcast is going on.
Thank you.
We still broadcasting? Awesome. Nathan Curtis at 8 Shapes over in the DC area. I think he does a very elegant job at up what a design system is. He kind of phrases it as a living funded product that has a product owner and a backlog, which serves an ecosystem. Really, it's kind of the box that we're drawing around all of these different disciplines and these different that the team's made, packaging it up as one single entity.
So one way to think about it, as stated by Brad Frost, poster child of atomic design and pattern library, is that in the past you would do your design and development, you would churn out a website, and then at the end you scrape at the patterns, and then those go on to be very useful, except usually they just kind of go into the trash.
More times than not.
The way we're moving towards is that you do your design and development into a design system, and this is then goes on to power your website, goes on to power your pattern library. It's a sustainable
Just seeing the initial screen again.
Way of doing design and development.
We're worried about posterity here.
Someone's screen sharing. All right. So.
Okay, now I'm seeing.
Is that on my face?
Not your face. I'm seeing what you had on the screen a minute ago. diagrams, types of interface.
You need to go back to Hangouts and click the green thing on the left. On the left is a green, yeah, that's the green thing. Click on that and then hit that screen. Yep, hit that screen.
That's true.
Up there.
Not that one. Stop broadcast.
And they said that they present to everyone. I don't know if that matters. I think that's only for live.
And go back to the.
You don't have to, as long as you get that too.
Still showing up?
Now I'm getting the
Yeah, I think it's because it's.
It'll
a little
come,
bit of
it'll
a
come.
delay.
All right.
Okay.
No good? We still good?
Yeah.
Because I think it crashed when you went full screen.
That's only affecting the live, it's still recording.
Here we go.
We good? All right. These are
Oh
hard.
man, wait till we get into the live demos.
Yeah. I wish he was joking. All right. Let's pick this back up.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go to the next slide.
Okay. So design system is just this big departure from how we had traditionally, handled this artifact, the pattern library. It's now, front and center, the thing that's powering all of the different web properties, the different deliverables, the different resources that we have. Simply, Pattern Lab is not a design system. It's a tool that, for us at Pega Systems, a huge portion of how we actually make some of the magic happen.
So then part 2, Pattern Lab and Drupal. Pattern Lab and Drupal 8, got a nice design system going, and those just work seamlessly, right? There are no issues. Perfection.
I think it's really interesting, actually. Driven development methodology has been going on for around, we've been talking about it for a long time, but I would say maybe the last 2 years or so, there's been a lot of talks at DrupalCon New Orleans and DrupalCon LA, actually. Where some really smart folks have actually figured out how to get these two different technologies to play nicely together and actually have this, this whole sort of holy grail single source of truth. 2 years and counting seems like a long time, and surely we would have figured out all of the logistics on making this thing work seamlessly. Well, here's the thing. I'm not sure if any of you guys are aware, but there's actually 2 versions of Pattern Lab out there. There's Pattern Lab for Node, which has been doing its own thing for quite some time now. And there's also Pattern Lab for PHP, which all of these DrupalCon talks have been talking about. That's the one that everyone uses, which supports twig templating. It can, with a little bit of work, get wired up to Drupal. One tiny little problem about that version of Pattern Lab, a little bit. Pattern Lab hasn't gotten updated in almost a year. So the key piece of technology that makes this whole ecosystem work.
And hence the Drupal Pattern Lab working group was born. Coming out of Baltimore, DrupalCon.
Yep.
Many like-minded folks joined heads. Evan Lovely, Four Kitchens, Alexi, us. And what we did is decided to fork Pattern Lab. And why fork Pattern Lab? Why not do what has been done before, where you just create your own separate project, completely unrelated, and say like, oh, well, we're going to go off in a different direction.
And just to be clear, that's what everyone else has done up to this point. has their Emulsify project. Phase 2 had their Pattern Lab starter project. Up till this point, everyone was fending for themselves.
Well, yeah, and the reason we do it is because we want to drive this back into Pattern Lab. Pattern Lab, Drupal 8, maturing together, lots of people are working on this, discovering problems with it, creating solutions for them, and then also throwing in a little bit of vision and direction and just doing it all out of love.
We want this thing to work. If if you're proposing some fixes that they're never merged in, they're never actually addressed, you kind of hit a brick wall. So our hope here is we will get merged back in when the different folks that are maintaining the main code base, anyone's out at the front door. But
why isn't Pattern Lab being updated since July 16?
So Brad Frost, he's the Pattern Lab evangelist. He does really fantastic work talking about the ecosystem and the methodology. He's not necessarily like the main Pattern Lab developer. He's not the one who's writing all of the PHP code for this. It's actually his partner in crime, is Dave Olson. Dave's the one that actually wrote the majority of Pattern Lab PHP core. That's what's powering all this stuff. And I believe, based on my chat with Evan Lovely at Phase 2, I think Dave doesn't actually do Pattern Lab on his day-to-day job right now, which makes sense. If you don't, if you're busy with life, it's very difficult to fostering an ecosystem. And for this particular portion of Pattern Lab PHP core, I think David, if I'm not mistaken, is like the main contributor, or the main person who has the ability to even contribute to it. There are other parts that make up the Pattern Lab ecosystem, like the twig engine that wired directly into this Pattern Lab PHP core. That is more maintainers. Like Evan actually is one of those few people that has the ability to merge in code, and he has been really helpful to get some of these other side initiatives, get the ball rolling on them. But the main of what makes Pattern Lab work, Dave is the main person who has the ability to actually merge stuff in. We're trying. We're hoping that when we continue to rack up some wins here, kind of figure out what's going on with him and hopefully get some more contributors added. So basically, we formed this working group at DrupalCon with the main initiative to keep the lights on and to help start providing some consolidated resources so that other folks who are just getting started using Pattern Lab with the context of Drupal in mind, actually have some tangible things that they can kind of get their feet wet with. And we want to take you guys through a couple of those examples to show you really how do you get started with this. So I know it's a presentation. There has to be at least one code example on there. So I'm gonna actually do this as a live demo for you guys. All right. So I'll walk you guys through what's actually going on. So Pattern Lab uses Composer, which helps quite a bit with managing the dependencies and wiring stuff up. What's going on here is we are Composer. I'm going to go create a brand new Pattern Lab. Specifically, we have this Twig Standard Edition project up on GitHub right now. Go create a new Pattern Lab instance using that. Put it in a folder called Design for Drupal. Change into that folder, and then run the main Pattern Lab, and then open the index file that is generated from all of this. Which, that's Hangouts. Hey. Now you have one Pattern Lab. That's it. You can clap if you want. You don't have to. I can't mirror your screens, apparently. This is a fully working version of Pattern Lab. It's using Twig templates. One of the starter kits, which is a collection of different pattern examples that show you some ways that you can be using Pattern Lab. It definitely is really just, a collection of examples. You could take it or leave it, but hopefully, even having this sort of collection of parts gives people ideas on how do you start stitching together your own pattern library and fit it into this sort of ecosystem.
Solution number 2. We now have a repo which is actively maintained and releasing updates, which is really nice. Here is possibly the single greatest pull request of all time. Pattern Lab PHP dev does not work if you try to pull it down and work on it. And the reason is that there is a single solitary character that needs to be removed. And this pull request removes that single solitary character that is breaking dev.
Best pull request ever. But now you can actually do dev work. You don't have to, well, you couldn't do anything until this. And that pull request was in the main project for a good while too.
Yeah, for like a year. And there are 7 or 8 of these outstanding issues that have been open for months and months, which were now very low-hanging fruit. Just remove the character, make this change, make that change, to really get it back up to speed.
Actually, I think this one in particular might be worth talking about a little bit more. The Lineage one. So a lot of people know, like, oh, Pattern Lab, it's atomic design, it's Lego blocks. A lot of people get that. We don't need to cover like really what is Pattern Lab conceptually, but there actually is a lot of functionality that Pattern Lab provides. There's a lot of value that it is familiar with without getting like a little bit of a tour.
So live demo time again. Yes.
Exit it out.
So Lineage is basically you open up, you get Pattern Lab up and running, you go to check out a component, and it does this absolutely wonderful thing where it shows you everywhere the component is being used and everything that uses the component. And everything that the component uses. So you get this whole parents, children, you can see if you make a change to it, where will that change, take place, impact. It's really, really just like a super nice functionality. It's
one of the biggest features of Pattern Lab. And this is automatic. Like, you don't need to do any extra work. It automatically and shows you how things are related.
Except it in the current Pattern Lab PHP doesn't.
Oh, not that one, not that one. Let me get back.
Well, we got the slide.
Yeah, we got the slide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Jon Snow of components. Who is the parent? We have no idea. It's somebody had a family tree and just trashed it. Lost the time.
For a while, I actually thought we ones with this problem. Turns out that our friends at mass.gov with their new Mayflower project, where they're also trying to roll out a design system for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're actually also having this exact same problem. Well,
Okay, so then now we've got it back. That
Yep.
has been fixed, resolved,
done.
functionality restored.
This has been broken for a year. I didn't realize it until recently, but this actually broke right around the same time when this particular approach for wiring up your using this twig namespaced approach here. When we added this in, we added it so that Drupal 8 could actually start referencing and using the patterns that we have in our pattern library. And this is when we're doing it like this. We're using the Drupal the UI components module. Components module, the UI patterns, not modules. That's a separate thing. Turns out that this specific syntax, while it makes Pattern Lab and Drupal work together, it makes Pattern Lab break up with itself, at least partially. So it's fixed. Move on to other things.
Yeah.
Which,
The next slide.
yeah, including the next slide. Before and after, just for context. Theme tools. This is actually a really unexpected side project that spun up at DrupalCon. So Pattern Lab actually gives us quite a lot of functionality out of the box. Besides compiling your patterns and showing you the variations, acting like a living style guide, and providing a bit of a tool set for documenting your patterns. It wants to be like a one-stop shop. So it does things that you wouldn't necessarily expect a pattern library to also do. Things like have its own server spin up, or watch your files for changes and automatically recompile things. And granted, I understand the reasons why Pattern Lab has out of the box make it easier for non-developers, designers to get up and running very quickly. A modern website, at least the front end side of these modern websites, there's a lot of tools available that are updated, almost on a daily basis. Things like, how do I compile my Sass? How do I compile my JavaScript and tell me when I break things? How do I optimize my images? How do I get a server spun up that and reloads itself whenever I make a change? There's a lot of very great options that the whole community has come up with. Pattern Lab. The thing that Evan and I were talking about when this project kind of came up was, it would be great if there was one place to get some examples on, like, how do I get my tools up and running. That's not necessarily a Drupal problem. Like, it's a front-end development and how it relates to all this other problem. So we actually took this idea of having a collection of example front-end build tasks. Things like, getting my Jekyll static website up and running, compiling my CSS, compiling my JavaScript, getting my icons all optimized and combined together. We kind of kicked it out willingly. We moved on from the Pattern Lab organization into its own separate side project. And we're still looking to use this in a lot of the examples that we've been putting together. But we felt like there was enough value in having this separate project that non-Drupal developers could still get a lot of value out of having these examples to go off of. Maybe not use exactly out of the box, but at least use it as a source of inspiration to roll their own, front-end build tools. And that brings us to part 3.
Unsolved mystery. The final frontier.
So, I would honestly say that this has probably been the most talked about thing over at where we work. I think for good reason. When we started, there was 3 websites, 3 properties that we were managing. There's a lot of very strong opinions and thoughts as to how a design system wiring up to those things, how things should come from the top down or from the bottom up. When you have a system that's getting frequently updated and your visual language is evolving over a relatively short amount of time, very challenging to figure out these design iterations and design improvements and actually spread that and actually ship that across the board to all of the different stakeholders and all the different places where you can actually things.
This is just a card. This is a relatively simple component, and yet you have variations within sites, variation across sites, and then multiply this times components, so dozens and dozens of, how do you coordinate all that?
Right, and atomic design in mind, there's actually a lot of different parts that are involved in just card. You have the image, you have responsive images and how you're going to be loading them. You have your topography system. You have the system to actually load your fonts, make them show up. Topography is like your scale, how your topography is sized across the board. You have the invisible spacing that actually is providing your white space that lay everything out nicely. You have your buttons and the colors that are getting used in your buttons. There's a lot of work involved in getting just one of these wired up, let alone coordinating all of those different individual moving parts everywhere. We don't have an answer.
Yeah, how do we do this? If you have any ideas, please let us know.
We do have, we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we higher and higher fruit on the tree. And, we are exploring a few potential options for this, one of which is this tool called Lerna, L-E-R-N-A. It is currently getting used by a bunch of very high-profile JavaScript-y projects like Facebook's React project or Babel, which lets you take your very, very new JavaScript syntax and make it work on, other browser environments that aren't quite as up to date. They're using that along with other folks like actually Cloudflare. Their UI, Cloudflare UI design system is also taking advantage of this. Essentially, what it lets you do is take a single monolithic repository to a mono repository. Like it's the exact same thing. The difference is a mono repo is still a single source of truth. Each of the different parts in that system is individually versioned, individually published whenever there's a change. So if we updated the card, and even just a part of the card, like the colors that are getting used as part of this, would actually get versioned and published separately. So at any given point, you have just one single source of truth consuming your system. Anyone who wants to pull down just the buttons or just the topography or just your colors can take advantage of having a design system stability that assurances that only the parts of the system that they're ready to upgrade, ready to change, really are changing. Still working on how do you make that work with Pattern Lab and work with Drupal. There's a lot of work involved, but we are seeing some kind of promising initial observations from that.
Another unsolved problem is that Pattern Lab and Drupal just aren't the same thing. They are not equal, that you have to stitch them together. And anytime you have to stitch something together, it's not seamless.
So this is a fairly recent project that we rolled out. We have a new Pega Academy website. It's kind of a training and online course portal to get up to speed and refine your skills using our software. Drupal site live website is up at the top, and what we have in our Pattern Lab instance is at the bottom. And you know, there are a lot of similarities between the two. We have our utility nav, you know, pretty much being one-to-one. The logo changed, but the logo itself, the way it's constructed, is still one-to-one. But then we have the search component here. And you know, we had gone through this exercise before, wiring up our different input fields, wiring up our form fields. And so it's like, well, why doesn't the live site look exactly like the pattern libraries say? What gives? I'm not a Drupal developer, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when you want this kind of seamlessness, like generally, like, I mean, the ideal is you get it merged into core, right? That's like, if you can get it into core, then like you have Drupal committing to support this, but like in the, you know, maybe you have like an API in the middle, layout API. I know that Bootstrap has its own module that goes with the theme.
It kind of helps with that between the two different ecosystems. And you know, there is this pattern called the model view presenter pattern that's come up more recently as one of those ways to kind of manage and moderate the two different systems. So Pattern Lab effectively is the single source of truth for your templates. Drupal's, you know, historic templates folder act as kind of the middleman, where it points at your Pattern Lab single source of truth, kind of converts the data between the two different systems. So Pattern Lab might call one piece of data one thing, Drupal might call it another. This one template sits in between the two to help make sure everyone's speaking the same lingo. This is another example on, you know, I would say it was actually a good learning opportunity for everyone. Also seeing how this thing works even when we're not really looking at it. So quite a while ago, probably around 6 months ago, we rolled out our single sign-on account management Drupal 8 website, where we went through the whole exercise of wiring up our form fields and the different form UI elements to come up with a much more elegant user onboarding experience. More recently, you know, we were about to hit the go live button on our new Pega Academy site, and we got a quick ping from our stakeholder, and they were asking, well, where's the contact us form? What contact us form? There is not a contact us form. We would have had it in Pattern Lab if we did. So I've done form stuff before, and actually, this was a bit to my surprise, we still had a lot of that stuff still wired up behind the scenes. It's not perfect. You know, there's some stuff that we're still working to polish up a little bit, but our custom select forms, those are working. Our buttons are working. The actual input fields are working. Doesn't have the box around it, but besides that, a lot of the parts that make up this sort of user experience are still wired up. Translation that we're kind of figuring out, how do we make more organically and automatically compared to the right?
You can add more stitches, but what you really want is just seamless.
What is the left side versus the right?
The left is as the form as originally created within Marcotte, and then the right was like the last minute request to add a form, and we were just like, well, let's throw it in and see what happens. And ideally, if you just threw it in and let it happen, it would look the same, but it didn't.
So the left one, if I'm on the actual website, another great opportunity for a live demo.
Yeah.
Is the one that's actually live on the website. And you'll notice that this looks almost exactly the same as what it looks like in Pattern Lab, the same as what's in Pattern Lab right now. It's using the exact same twig templates that Pattern Lab's using for all the parts that make up the form. The new site that we're rolling out, because it didn't have that in the specifications, it didn't have that as one of the requirements. We weren't expecting a form. It just happened because we're using the same design system, because we're using the same parts. It already had information as to like what are the different pieces that I need in order to make my form work. And because we're evolving the same, the single code base, Drupal knew, oh, well, if I need my custom select it knows where to look in that pattern library. So some of that information did still carry through, even though it was a completely separate project, completely separate website. There was still this carried on knowledge that that did work. But there's still some work to be done to make that a more automatic, more seamless transition.
Yeah, it kind of ended up with a mutant pattern.
Yeah.
We're pretty close to the wire.
Okay, so let's go over the last one really quick. It's shared twig extensions. Just out of curiosity, has anyone here done any work with making twig do more stuff out of the box than it would normally do? Haven't, I would strongly recommend checking it out. It's actually one of the most appealing characteristics that twig gives you out of the box. You can make twig more awesome. You can take a lot of advanced functionality and package it up in a really simple to use format. Make twig do a lot more than what it would normally want to do. I'll skip over the brief chat I had with some of the Four Kitchens guys, but basically up till now, the problem we've been running into internally has been, we can supercharge Pattern Lab to, use a shorthand grid system. You don't have to know what classes to use. It just uses a custom little grid tag and cell tag to make your grid system just work. That natively, Drupal can reference your patterns, without much of an issue. But anything that you're doing to make those templates do a lot more, Drupal just doesn't understand. We'd have to do our extensions on the Pattern Lab side and then just copy and paste them over, plus a little bit of rework on the Drupal side. That's happened quite a number of times actually in the past year. We'll create a new template, Drupal tries to pull it in, and it just breaks because we're trying to use something new that Drupal wasn't quite ready for. I'm not a Drupal developer. I've never even written my own Drupal module. Until just recently. So I have no idea how terrible this is. Any feedback would be fantastic.
It's the greatest module of all time.
I have no idea what I'm doing. That lets you define your Pattern Lab twig extensions, your custom functions and filters and custom twig tags. And when you switch it on in Drupal, it tells Drupal, oh, well, here's where my pattern library is inside of Drupal in my code base. And I know Pattern Lab has its own little opinionated way of different bits of twig functionality. Well, here's how to speak the same lingo. Here's how to translate it just a little bit. So you can use that exact same single source of truth. From what I've seen so far, it looks like this might actually work. Still experimental, still working out the kinks.
In as much as you can use twig extensions in Pattern Lab that Drupal doesn't support, but then Drupal goes directly and pulls them from Pattern Lab. It's very powerful. You update it in one place, so as long as it works with the patterns that you already have in Pattern Lab, and then go update Drupal. Drupal's already up to date with whatever those changes might be. Really exciting. I'm really interested to see where we can take this approach of making Pattern Lab work better on the Drupal side and making Drupal working better on the Pattern Lab side. See where this goes. That's it. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sitting in. Check out the the drill. Use it. Like it, contribute. Find bugs. help us out.
Help us make this better.
We have a GitHub Drupal pattern lab. We have a blog. We're going to be updating the blog with this presentation pretty soon.
Yep, exactly. Page is finally being fixed.
And we have Slack.
Definitely join us in the Slack channel.
There's dozens of us.
We literally started this at DrupalCon, like I think the last day on the sprint day, and we're already at 83 plus people. So definitely check us out there. Let us know what questions you have, what ideas you have. I'm trying to wire these things up. That's what the Slack channel's for. It's to help make this more of a community and help share ideas and approaches on how to make all this stuff work.
Progress just over the last couple of months. There's a lot of velocity. And also, right now that we're finished, maybe we don't have time for questions, but there is going to be a bot. We're going to have a go to a bot right now, room 144. So
maybe after a little bit of coffee, but yeah.
But if you want to talk to us more about this, see you there. Do we have time for questions?
It's 3:24.
Yeah. So
I guess we have 5 minutes.
at your discretion.
Yeah, at your discretion. If anyone has any questions.
Is doing completely unique to Drupal, or can that be applied to other frameworks, whether it's Node, React, or I don't know?
It's a great question. One of the approaches that we've been trying very hard to stick to has been platform agnostic. Do things that are platform agnostic. Granted, we are using Twig templates, which speak Twig natively. We are actually, not only have we gotten other Twig-friendly CMSs like Grav, which is like a static site generator. We've gotten Grav to actually a single source of truth. There's another one that is escaping my mind that's also based on Symfony that we're also looking to get wired up. So getting that, if you speak Twig, getting it to still pull in the same single source of truth, we've already gotten a bunch of other systems to use that. Additionally, just because you don't speak the templating doesn't mean that you can't speak the same CSS, the same JavaScript, and still reference the same kind of markup structure. So for any systems that are not in the Drupal Twig ecosystem, things like a React project would be, or if you're doing stuff that's very heavy on web components, there definitely still is a lot of benefit we feel that you can get out of having a single design system source of truth. That might be reflected different ways depending on what application or what particular implementation you might have.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you closing the hangout? Yeah, this one.